Samsung's newest flagships have finally made it into our hands. So, it's Joshua Vergara from Android Authority. What's going on, everybody? And let me tell you about the first 48 hours that I've spent with the Samsung Galaxy S7. Now, like I've already mentioned, we've had the Samsung Galaxy S7 and S7 Edge, which Lon is reviewing, for a couple of days now, and that's obviously not enough for a full review, so we wanted to test out the two phones for a more extensive period of time, and we'll bring you that full review pretty soon. But for now, let's talk about the phone after a couple of days of usage.
I've been waiting a long time to feel this way, but when I reach my happiness, a young face will out and say,
There is actually a OTG USB adapter that's included that you can connect to the micro USB port on the bottom and then connect any other phone to the Galaxy S7 so you can transfer pretty much everything between the two devices. First things first, when it comes to the design, I cannot get over just how great this phone feels in the hand. This is a perfectly sized device, but there are curves on the back, much like the Galaxy Note 5, which make the phone sit so beautifully in the hand. For a 5.1-inch screen, it certainly doesn't feel like a 5.1-inch device. Here's a shot of me using the actual phone, and then here's the Galaxy S6 in my other hand. Now, while these two devices are roughly the same size, it actually feels like the Galaxy S7 is a little bit smaller. And then, of course, here is the S6 Edge, and with the S6 Edge, you can turn it over and it feels like the S7 now. Aside from the fact that Samsung basically took a shrink ray to the Note 5 and created the S7, you have a lot of the same elements from all of the phones that came out from Samsung last year. Pretty much every button is where you would expect it to be, and the camera hump on the back is where you see some streamlining as the camera hump has been reduced greatly and is now much more flush with the backing. Hand gymnastics are at a bare minimum, as going from left to right is incredibly easy, and then jumping up to the top really requires very minimal movement when using in one hand. And one of the main additions to the design and body of the S7 is that it is now water and dust resistant. An IP68 certification means that no dust will be getting into the phone, and if you do take a tumble with the phone and it falls into some sort of body of water, you can just wipe it right off and keep on going. The display of the Galaxy S7 is exactly what you would expect, a Super AMOLED screen with Quad HD resolution bringing very high pixel densities and very punched out colors. AMOLED displays tend to add a couple of points to a device, but we've also seen them on plenty of devices over the last year, not just Samsung devices. In this case, however, the Super AMOLED display is still providing the real punched out colors, but maybe we're getting so used to the AMOLED construction that we only really see the differences when we put it up against an IPS or an LCD display. And of course, there is the always-on display, which so far hasn't hindered the battery life not one bit. A very fraction of a percentage is what is taken up every hour when you do have the always display on, and in my case, I like to have it displaying the calendar. Now we can move on to performance, and the version that I'm using is actually a European version that has the Exynos 8890 with Mali graphics backing it up. Now performance on here has been nothing short of amazing, honestly, because Samsung has really done a good job of optimizing its processor for its own software, and it really shows. It's very smooth, and even added transitions in and out of the recent app screen provide a very seamless feeling experience. And I've been really just putting a lot of applications in the background and multitasking as much as I can, and I haven't seen any applications really crash or have much slowdown at all. If there's one thing that we need to do a little bit more, it's gaming on this device, and speaking of that, we will do some benchmarks to compare the Exynos 8890 with the Snapdragon 820 version that we will get here in the States. But until then, you can rest assured that the Exynos 8890 continues what the Exynos has been able to prove in previous devices like the Note 5 and the S6 before it. But the other big addition is, of course, the micro SD card slot, and we've already started to take advantage of it, thankfully with a SanDisk 200GB micro SD card that I've already put into the phone. Inside of the device, you get 32GB of onboard storage, but once that ends, you are able to bolster it with expandable storage. But now we can finally talk about battery life, and though more extensive testing will be done for a full review that will be coming very soon, I can tell you that over the last couple of days, battery life has been pretty great. 3000 milliamp hours is what you get inside of the Galaxy S7, and even though it's not as large as the larger 3600 milliamp hour battery of the S7 Edge, it still provides much better battery life than Samsung has has ever been able to give. On the first day that I used this, I took it straight to the Broad Museum in LA to get some camera samples, and I used the camera very extensively throughout that day. I was still able to get 3.5 hours of screen on time even with that super heavy usage. The day after, however, I used the phone more regularly, more normally rather, and under that moderate, more general usage, I was able to get over 5 hours of screen on time over the course of an entire day. Even though we're going to continue our testing, so far, we think that for general users, this phone will be able to go even maybe about 2 days if you are a moderate or more general user. Changes also come in the camera. We no longer have a 16 megapixel shooter, but now we have 12 megapixels in the camera with larger 1.4 micron pixels. And each pixel is a focus pixel in the sense that each one is able to help with the autofocus. And the autofocus speed is actually really great. Going from something that's close to the phone to something that's far from it only takes really just a split second, and it focuses cleanly on the subject very easily. The front-facing camera does do a pretty good job, but of course it does not have OIS installed, and that means that you have to be pretty steady when taking a selfie. One really nice thing about the front-facing camera is that it can record video in Quad HD resolution, which will be really nice for those of you who want to record maybe vlogs or any selfie videos. But moving to the rear camera, we are going to go through a camera shootout and see all of the photos in a more extensive way, and we'll give you our opinions a little bit later. But for 12 megapixel photos, these are actually not all that bad. The only main caveats that I have so far with the rear facing camera is that in lower light situations, it tends to go a little bit warmer with the color temperature. And that is something that you can fix in the Pro manual mode, but in auto, it is a little bit annoying. In well-lit situations, however, things look quite nice, but with a lower megapixel count, you are going to lose some detail in the finer points of the photo. And if you zoom into the photos, you'll also see that some noise reduction is trying to compensate for this. So the photos might not be as sharp as they used to be in the more megapixel heavy cameras in previous iterations, but the Galaxy S7 is still proving to be a pretty viable tool for the general shutterbug. And finally, in software, we do have TouchWiz. And if you are familiar with TouchWiz from before, it's pretty much everything you would expect. It is easy to get into because the fingerprint reader still works wonderfully. You just have to press the home button to wake up the device and then leave the finger there, and it unlocks pretty seamlessly. From there, however, TouchWiz still has all of the more colorful, maybe the more rounded edge icons throughout the entire interface. And there is still the app drawer, even though we mentioned in our hands-on video from MWC that there is a Galaxy Labs option that can turn off the app drawer. Now that's something we'll touch upon in the full review, but until then, TouchWiz still provides all of the different features, even stuff like the Smart Stay, but a lot of the extra features that you may or may not ever use are all relegated to the same menu area called Advanced Features. Now, one thing I should note is that this version of the Galaxy S7, which is a European version, does not come with the Flipboard briefing home screen. Instead, it comes with a new news aggregator called Update. So for those of you in the States, don't take this as the gospel truth when it comes to what you're going to get in the Galaxy S7's TouchWiz. This is just a different news aggregator that is mainly just for Germany, Spain, and other parts of Europe. There really aren't too many more additions inside of TouchWiz, especially this time around, except for the always-on display. And with the always-on display, you are able to put on there a clock, or you are able to put there a calendar, and you can even put a couple of images on there, but they are predefined and you aren't able to just put anything on the display. We are going to do more extensive testing on the Galaxy S7, including benchmarks comparing the Exynos and the Snapdragon versions, and also we're going to do a camera shootout so you can see what the camera quality really is like on these two phones. Until then, keep it tuned to Android Authority for that and even more. Our full review will be here within the next week or so, and you can stay tuned for that and even more about Samsung's new flagships, because we are your source for all things Android.